Welcome to episode number 4 of the From Trauma to Joy podcast. I'm Mike McNamara, and I'm accompanied by my friends and colleagues, Wade Cates and Tim Lynch. And so, first of all, thanks for watching this. And just a reminder, the reason that we do this is to help people. And so, right off the top, the reason I want you to like, share, and subscribe to this is so that other people will see it and a door might open so that you might change their life. So I want to say that right from the get-go. We're here to help people. That's why we're doing this. And we could use your help in helping people. And the way you can do that, because I'm going to tell you this, you have no idea among your friends who's struggling, because we tend to do that. All of us do that. And we're going to talk about that today. In a very private way when we talk about how each one of us isolated ourselves. And so we want you to help in that. And the way you can do that is by liking, sharing, subscribing to this, and also by tagging people with comments. No matter what platform you're watching on, you can tag them in a comment and they'll see this. And again, that may open a door to a conversation that will be life-changing. Now, we're going to talk about isolation today. And the first thing I'll tell you is that isolation opens a door that takes you down a path that can kill you. I would tell you that you can get through anything if you don't isolate yourself. So if you're struggling, but if you're connected to your tribe, you'll get through it. No doubt in my mind. But if you isolate yourself, and the things that we tell ourselves that take us there, we'll talk about here. But it starts with just being ignorant. And if you're watching this, it's a good sign because you want to learn about this. And we can teach you about that. And that's what we're here to do. So, Wade, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Are you feeling blue? Because you've got a little blue tint to you. Tell everybody what happened to your other light.
Well, my dogs were wrestling and broke my other lamp. So I've got to replace that.
It happens. It's a good reason. A lot of times, there's no good reason, but that's a good reason. All right. Timmy, you're going to get rain in McAllen, Texas today. No outside grilling. What's going on?
Yeah, it looks like we got serious weather coming in, man. It's El Nino year. It's going to save us from any hurricanes, though. That is the theory.
Yeah.
We've been getting a lot of rain. It's very green around here. It's weird.
Knock on wood. Okay. Knock on wood. Let's talk about isolation. Isolation is, we've been talking about that this week, but nobody starts out to isolate themselves. But the things that get you down towards isolation, one is ignorance, right? You go through something very difficult, traumatic, and you may or may not go see a professional. For a lot of people that do go see professionals, they don't like it. And so in your ignorance, what do you tell yourself? I'm going to suck it up. Nobody's coming to my pity party. And that's what you do. And, but again, and I'm going to tell you this, if that's what you've done, you're in good company because that's what we did. We're all tough guys. When tough things happen, what do? You suck it up and you keep going. Okay. And that's what we did. And so ignorance is part of it. In our ignorance, there's a couple little headlines that I would say are important. One is that nobody can understand what I've been through. Total bullshit. You're your own traumatic snowflake. We all are. But that's where the difference ends. The way we internalize this, the way we process it, the way we isolate, the way we fake, the way we numb, all of that tends to be the same for everybody. And the path out, I'll tell you, is the same if you want to transform your life. And so, but that's a piece of it. So it starts with our ignorance. Then nobody can understand me. And so because I love you, I'll never share this stuff with you because it's too bad. It's all bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And so that is kind of like the foundational work that gets you to isolation. Nobody starts out to isolate themselves from the start. What happens is you wind up isolated because of the ignorance and then conclusions you reach in your ignorance. So just general thoughts on isolation. Wade, you've been around this now. I've known you for over 4 years now. Your thoughts on isolation as you worked on your own and you've watched other people.
And it's like you said, it doesn't just happen all at once. It's a thing that happens over time. And it is a killer because once you're into isolation, you still talk to yourself in your head, but you will lie to yourself and tell you things that, aren't true. And that pushes you down a darker and darker path. But, isolation happens almost naturally. I know even before we lost Juan, there was, I had a couple issues from deployments, and I come back and I slowly started withdrawal from certain things. I had some leadership opportunities in the job world that I didn't pursue because I knew that I had some anger issues that would just, I'm a very calm guy, but the wrong thing can make me react with no warning. So I started to pull back from that. And then after a while, I started to compare myself to contemporaries where they were financially and career-wise versus me. There's nothing wrong with what I do, but I was losing ground in that comparison. And I started comparing self-worth to economic status and not money, but look what they're doing. Their family's going on vacation this year. Mine's not. Things like that, right? Not all about let's all make $1 million, which if you make $1 million, go make $1 million. I highly encourage it. It's got to be great. But you understand what I'm saying? The comparison checklist started going in my head. And the bigger the checklist got, the further back I isolated, even before we lost Juan.
Well, and one of the points that I want to make to everybody is that I realize I learned about isolation in all the interviews I ever did, because intuitively, your intuition will lead you to isolate. Because again, in your ignorance, this path is not intuitive, right? If anything, it's counterintuitive. You have to learn to transform your life. And that's what we talk. That's what this is about, transformation. But intuitively, what do? Nobody can understand me because what I've been through is so unique, as we know, bullshit. And the way we begin our isolation is I'm not going to share that stuff with anybody because it's too painful for me. And so what I say is, well, I won't go there with you because I love you. That's an isolation statement. And so it is all designed in our ignorance to protect ourselves. And we slowly but surely build this case that nobody can understand me. This doesn't work. That's not for me. And you go deeper and deeper into this world of isolation. Nobody's coming to my pity party. I just need to suck it up. I tried to go to therapy. It didn't work. I think that's bullshit. Now I'm alone. But again, I think that just so everybody knows, and I want you to be gentle with yourself if you've gone down this path, because it's the way everybody does it. This is what's atypical. And we all have a version of that. So Timmy, that's what I want you to understand. Intuitively, we move towards isolation. Timmy, talk about isolation.
Well, as you remember, I was physically isolated in Afghanistan. For those last few years I was there, had Afghans working around me, but I was by myself, essentially. And although I would see you and others periodically, I was out there alone, self-medicating. But at the time, thinking I was the coolest guy in the world because I was sitting there alone doing all these massive projects and living the life, as it were. But all I was doing was burying myself deeper. And it was the reckoning was when I came home and was no longer had that kind of job responsibility, those kind of compensation levels, all that stuff went away like that. And I was still isolated, and that was when things started to turn very much for the worse for me. But being isolated that entire time was of no help whatsoever.
But you don't know your you don't think you're isolating. You don't know you're isolating. You just know that, hey, nobody's coming to Tim Lynch's pity party, right?
No, I at the time I thought it was very cool to be out working that way. I don't think it did me any favors in the long run. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Well,
But I
and
was doing
again,
that for years.
that's why to me it's so important, because what my trauma starts with my parents. My dad's, and we all are from very different backgrounds. Wade's father's a preacher and farmer. My dad's a Major League Baseball guy. So I don't want to tell anybody that my family was fucked up, because I was proud of my family, So maybe one or two of my friends knew, and they only knew a little bit of what was going on in my family. But that's when it started. And I developed a very bad habit but I didn't know another way. And like I say, I tell the story. I'm 3 units short of a minor in theology, because I was trying to understand why God would do this. What made this make sense? Why my beautiful little family was exploding in front of me. And so what did I do? I kept it to myself. I'm a tough guy. I'm a smart guy. I sucked it up. I'd figure out how to do this. And so I want to talk about things that make it worse. So over the course of a lifetime, as people, if you've watched us before, we all served in the Marine Corps. We've all been in harm's way. We've all done that stuff. And so that's another layer that gets added to the personal stuff. And then for a lot of people, either guilt, whether it's actual guilt or assumed guilt, most of the time it's assumed, because, we don't talk about it. So we can't figure out that it's bullshit when it is. And then failure. And a lot of times it's the same. I categorize guilt in 2 categories: actual guilt and assumed guilt. 98% of guilt people talk about is assumed. It's not real. When you actually put the pieces together, you look at them and say, this is not your fault. You can't be guilty of this because it wasn't your fault. But in the silence that accompanies isolation, you convince yourself. And as Wade said a few minutes ago, you keep talking to yourself and you convince yourself that it was your fault, that you are guilty. And the same thing with failure. There's a lot of ingredients that go into something failing. But for a lot of people, when they look at it, they will take that failure and they'll say, no, it was my fault. And they're absolutely convinced that it was. But again, all that's done in this isolated space because we're not talking about it. So, Wade, I want you to talk about, before Juan's suicide, before we crossed paths, you're looking at other people for getting further down the road. Did that impact your life, in terms of the way you looked at yourself and say, I'm.
Yeah. It becomes a perpetual motion engine the wrong way. It means it drives you the wrong way, because the more you think about it, the more you affirm your own thoughts, because you're the only one talking to you, and you tend to be your own worst accuser, right? And it just pushes you farther back from reality, and it just slows your progress, slows any forward progress down. You tend to become less productive. You may still work extremely hard. I've always worked hard, but as far as moving forward up a productivity ladder, no. One of the things that I was worried about was, I talked about some explosive anger stuff. This was years ago. I had to have a sinuplasty, go in and fix my sinuses, and I had a deviated septum, broken nose sometimes. So they went in and they fixed that, and they had to splint it. Well, a week after the surgery, they got to take the splints out of my nose. And this was my first time that I realized, or that it concerned me enough to withdraw from certain situations. As I was laying in the chair, fully reclined, and the doctor goes to pull that splint out of my nose. And when I say it hurt, I don't know how to describe the level of pain, but it was intense. But the next thing I remember is I am standing over the doctor, And he is looking very, very concerned because I don't know how it happened. It was just a moment of explosion that I went from laying down to standing over this guy about to punch him, right? So I realized my brain overwrote the situation. It was intense pain. It wasn't a normal situation you're going to find in the office, right? Earl Bob from the cubicle next door spills his coffee. I'm not going to beat the crap out of it, right? But it told me that there was a short fuse in there that I need to be careful of, and it overwrote the data. And that's one of the things that caused me to really pull back from situations. So it's you become your own worst accuser, and you start believing.
Tim, you come home and, and as you just alluded to, you don't have the same kind of job. You're going through a divorce. Walk us through the impact that your perceived failure had on your life.
Well, I perceived that I was getting hammered in a second divorce because I should have never gotten married, and I thought that was my fault. And I then also tried to look for a well-paying job so I could keep paying the mortgage on the house that was in Oregon. And it never occurred to me I wouldn't be able to find a job like that in coastal Oregon. I was completely and totally a failure at trying to find a work of any kind, for that matter. And on top of that, I'm getting hammered in divorce court. On top of that, I'm being put in a position where I've got to declare a no asset bankruptcy and hang around for 8 months until this thing clears the courts, and I don't have a place to live. And all of a sudden, it focused my mind considerably because I realized I was in very, very, very serious trouble. Completely isolated, nobody to talk to, not a whole lot of places to turn. And the few interactions I had, my family, my cousins, would go to Oregon often on the summertime, and I went to one of those family reunions with them, and I was not able to relate to anybody, and I was awfully angry too, and I was just, I guess you would say, emotionally numb, which is one of the symptoms of prolonged withdrawal from contact. Which it's funny to me because they fix it by giving you drugs that make you emotionally numb. I don't know how that works, but that's how the system goes, right?
Well, they don't they don't really fix you. That's a cover your ass move. So in case you kill yourself, they can say, well, we did what we were supposed to do. The long-term fix will be in years worth of Socratic discussions with you, where ultimately you will conclude that these things are in your best interest. But for the short term, good luck. But again, so when people listen to Tim, what I want you to see is layer after layer after layer after layer of life. And I don't know how to do it. I don't have these skills. What I do know how to do is I'm a tough guy. And again, I understand nobody's coming to my pity party. So I'll get through this because I've always gotten through life. I'll somehow figure it out. But again, what is organic to that narrative is isolation. And I'm not going to talk to anybody else. Nobody I know does that. And so I'm going to do what I know works. And that's why this is the intuitive way, is to isolate.
And the thing that's a shame about that is, had I reached out to my network of friends like you and the other guys I served with, I would have found a job. And that's perfectly normal. I mean, that's absolutely what we do, is network with each other. That's what we're here for, is to help each other out. But I was not going to let one of you son of a bitches know how screwed up I was. There was no friggin' way. And so I removed that from the table. The one thing that could have helped me, I automatically took off the table, because I'm not telling you guys nothing about this, because I was so embarrassed.
And that's why Tim is just this incredible example of what we all do. He doesn't want anybody to know how screwed up he is. He doesn't realize that I'm fighting this beast too. And most of our other friends, it goes back to are fighting the same fight. And it goes back to that Robin Williams quote, be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a fight that you know nothing about. Be kind always. But again, Tim's reaction is so typical. It's everybody's reaction. And the only reason I found that out was in all the interviews I did. Everybody said the same thing. I didn't go looking for help. I drank. I became a recluse. I did this. I did that. And I just sucked it up and kept going because that's what I know works. And so, Tim's story takes this turn when he talks about being homeless. And I can't find a job in Oregon, so I can't live in an apartment or a house. So where am I living? I'm living out of my truck. And then talk about concocting the narrative of walking across the country. Because
Yeah.
but again, what I want everybody to see is this is not atypical. Wade could substitute his circumstances for mine. I could substitute mine for Tim. In that, for me, I'm going back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm a member of the city council of my hometown. I coach a high school baseball team. I do the talk show, the #1 talk show in the region. So how am I dealing with my shit? Except for being homeless, I didn't tell any of my friends what I was going through, what I was feeling, the anger that I had, and the way it exploded, and I'd never had in my life. So except for the, unique things in terms of decisions that we all made, I did the exact same thing Tim did. But again, we're all doing it on that down low. We're all doing it very privately. And Wade's doing the same thing. He wants to kill this dentist or this rhinoplasty surgeon. And then you go home in your solitude and you think, that's why I need to be in this truck. That's why I can't do these things. And I'm the one that's damaged. I'm the one that's a failure. So, Tim, talk about concocting the story about going to walk across the country.
Well, I didn't know how to explain my circumstances. I was going to have to surrender the truck soon. Then what was I going to do? And I thought the best thing I could do was walk across the country for some damn reason. I was picking different reasons to say why I was doing it, but convinced that at the end of it, I'd be able to write a book of something interesting, of insights I gained while walking across the country. But so what was I, 55, 56 years old? Yeah. So I start training up and I break myself bad. I get the shin splints. My knees to this day aren't right. And I start talking to myself excessively. And then I catch myself talking to myself when I'm around other people. That's not good. This is a bad sign. I can figure that out. So then I thought, oh, I got a good mountain bike. Maybe I can ride my bike across the country. But that was obviously, that wasn't any better.
But that's
it was just
the
a
place
crazy
you're
idea.
describing is a hopeless place.
Yeah. I had no idea what to do. What else am I going to do? If I was on the road walking across the country, my half retired pay, I could live on that for a while. That's what I'm thinking. Hey, I'll be able to save some money, I bet. Because I can eat anything I want. I can eat junk food the whole way because I'll be burning so many calories. It won't matter, right? That was my thinking. Yeah, I could get by on Buc-ee's for a year that it took me to walk across the damn country. And which I thought would be romantic and aspiring and aspirational. See, I'm aspiring to people. What a lunatic idea. Gee, oh my God. It was, you go try walking around and living out of a backpack for just a few days up and down the Pacific coast. Man, there's nothing romantic about that shit at all. But it enforced a little bit of discipline. And at least I had that. About all I had. Enough discipline to get off my ass and walk. That's all the discipline I had.
Now, were you self-medicating then still?
I stopped drinking booze. I wasn't drinking any booze because I knew that that's what losers do. So no, I had followed the Joe Rogan school of self-medication and was smoking pot like a fiend because it's non-addictive, don't you know, Mac? Everybody says so. And it turns out to be as addictive as any other of those damn things that was difficult for me to stop doing, to be perfectly honest. Very difficult.
And again, the thing that I want everybody to know is that we all did the same thing with Tim grows up the son of a Marine Corps officer, Wade the son of a farmer preacher, me the son of a Major League Baseball manager and minor league baseball player, and we all had stay-at-home moms. Every one of us, and that's why I'm telling you, intuitively, we go to isolation. But compounding, you can see all these layers, right? Wade's frustration was my frustration, which was something's wrong with me. I'm damaged, and I think that's something that we feel until you begin to understand this. Timmy's damage is compounded by something I never felt, which was that I was a failure, that I had somehow failed. Wade sounds like he dealt with a little bit, but what I want you to see is that multiple layers. For me, my family, professional experiences, the murder of my nephews, the death of my sister, freezing to death. So it's like layer after layer after layer. My divorce, which was my personal failure, and every one of us has got our own version of that. Timmy's made worse by two things. One, the substance abuse, but again, the internal feeling of my failure. This is my failure. I'm a failure. I can't tell my friends because they're all successful and they will judge me. And the truth of that was we would not have given two shits and said, okay, well, what do you want to do? Let me see who I know that I could help and call. I mean, that's how long that would have taken. But that's not what you feel. That's not what anybody feels. And so give me thoughts on the whole impact of, I talk about guilt and failure being like steroids for everything else. They make it all worse. When you douse it with alcohol, when you douse it with a drug, when you soak it in guilt, when you soak it in failure, it makes every different issue you're dealing with, it makes it all worse. So Wade, talk about your experiences with any of that guilt, failure, and how it impacts all the other plates that are stacked on top of you already.
Yeah, it's like, looking through a fisheye lens. It just distorts everything and magnifies everything out of proportion. Everybody has setbacks. Everybody fails. Nobody is, if they almost nobody is on their 25-year plan track, that they wrote in high school. So, but in my head, I don't put anybody else does in my head, I'd had experiences that put me somewhere around the most amazing leaders in the world. I had been around highly successful people. I'd done all this, and all I can hear is, well, why aren't you more like them? Or, they had opportunities that I didn't have, but my own mind amplified the distance between them and made it a human quality thing versus it's an economic status. They've done well. They've done this. And, there's things you can learn from them. There's things you can apply. There's things you can do better, but it doesn't make them a better human being than you. It doesn't make them a better father than you. But as you start to run that scale, the distortion just grows and grows and grows. And then, well, I'll have a couple of drinks on the weekend and just get through the weekend to calm down. And that becomes I have a bottle a weekend. And then, it doesn't get a whole lot better than that until you just say, hey, I got to stop. I can't keep going down this road. And the first step was put down the bottle and get away from the artificial calm that only comes for a couple hours. Then the hangover kicks in, and the hangover amplifies the guilt. So now you just, you're 3 times as bad because you drank all weekend, and you've got to go through 2 days of getting over that, and then you're just back to normal guilt, which is bad enough. So yeah, all that amplifies that.
Timmy, your thoughts, failure, guilt, and its impact on on everything else you're dealing with.
Well, you talked about assumed guilt. And so when I was that isolated, I ruminated a lot about how I got there, and how I got there to include the failure of my first marriage, which I felt I was a failure as a father. I didn't feel like I'd been a very good father to my kids. All that time, I start thinking about how this happened, and it's always my fault. Everything I believe I remember accurately is something that I did wrong. And it is impossible to go 20 years back in your memory and have an accurate memory about any damn thing. It's hard to have an accurate memory a couple hours after an event. That's why eyewitnesses to crimes are the least reliable person out there, because they don't remember things right. But when you're in that state, it is impossible for you to assign blame to anybody. For me, I will say, this is just my experience, to assign anybody blame for anything. It was always me. And then that gives you a script which runs through your head of, you are the cause of everybody's misery, and so it's very difficult to have a positive self-image when that's the image that you have for yourself, and it's impossible that those memories are accurate memories, that those memories are influenced by that guilt that's laying on top of me, and excising it that's not going to excise anything. You got to take responsibility for what you do and try to make amends would be the only way out. But that was impossible. And so that's what I think, that assumed guilt is such a deadly thing, because it's very difficult. Once you assume and take that on board, it's very difficult to offload it. Very difficult.
And the reason it's such a problem, and I see this over and over again in groups that we do, and some I do on my own, is that we don't go there with anybody because it's too private, it's too personal, and I don't share those thoughts with anybody. I keep them to myself, because it just don't go there with people. And so it's in that you can see, add a few more bad events, soak it in alcohol. And let me talk about, people say, well, go to therapy. Well, a lot of people do. But let me tell you, and this is kind of an interesting thing that I've learned. You have a short-term need. And the way I'll describe it is, you're in the valley of the shadow of death. You cut yourself. It's arterial bleeding. And you go to a therapist, or a therapist is walking by. Now, you have a short-term immediate need to live, right? Somebody got to put a tourniquet on that thing so that you could live. Well, the therapist can't tell you what to do. Now, when I say, why not? The answer I got, and I just got this a week ago, again, well, a therapist is a very empowered person in your life. And if they begin to tell you what to do, if they do that, then they may abuse that. Me, like, well, what do you mean? Like sexual abuse, financial abuse, because they're telling you what to do. So the therapist is ethically prohibited from doing that. Okay. But the short-term requirement is that somebody's got to tell me what to do. Somebody's got to put a tourniquet on there. But the therapist is going to sit down, cross his or her legs, and teach you about tourniquets so that maybe you can put one on there. And then you bleed to death, right? But they can't do anything. And so to me, one of the other pieces of ignorance is we go to therapy. The therapist can't tell you what to do, like a leader can, like a life coach could. But we don't know that. So the therapist is doing this very generic discussion about life and hoping that at some point you come to the appropriate conclusions. Now, the short-term way they deal with you is they'll put you on medications that hopefully alleviate your symptoms of depression. You probably aren't truly depressed, but in your prolonged sadness, we'll call it that, you have symptoms of depression, your anxiety, and so they'll medicate you so you don't kill yourself. but we don't know that. And so when this doesn't change very fast, and I've done this for a few months, you know what we say? Fuck this. It ain't working for me. Yeah. And again, how many times have you heard this? I'm not getting anything out of it. That's why friends, leaders, and mentors are so important, because they will tell you what to do. And they won't take advantage of you sexually. Let me just throw that caveat in there. But they won't. Because they love you. They're there for you. And that's why, to me, this peer support is so important with people who know you, people who love you, people that aren't going to take advantage of you. And that's why if you're in a leadership position, in a business, in a military organization, that's why this is for you. You can go there and you can do these things. And so that, again, that's why this stuff is so important, that we learn it and that we're there to help each other. We're there to help people we work with. But what tends to happen with the overwhelming majority of people I deal with is that they did go to therapy. They didn't really hit it off with the person that is supposed to have this intimate relationship with you. They didn't like the way the drugs made them feel. And what they said was, I won't do that anymore. And again, that is, in my opinion, a lot of times the final piece of the isolation wall. Boom. Now I'm going to suck it up because nobody's coming to my pity party. I've tried. That shit doesn't work. This is what it is. And you're stuck in that isolated place doing the best you can do. Wade, thoughts on that?
Yeah. I did go to therapy eventually with the VA, and and one part, the good thing it does, at least I talked to someone, right? Which was the first time I talked about most of the stuff with anybody. But the reality was, you are, I don't know. I compare, it's like if you're a brand new pilot and you're on your first solo, you lose an engine, you call the air traffic control for help, and they give you a therapist. Well,
wait, they give you a what?
A therapist.
Oh.
You're
Right.
about to crash. We're going to let somebody talk about how you feel. No, you're in danger. There's things that you need to do. First, life-saving steps on an accident scene. Start the breathing, stop the bleeding, treat for shock. Everything else comes after that. Let's do the basics. Let's make sure you survive this event we're in right now. We don't have time to talk about it. We'll talk about everything, but not right now. Right now, this is what you have to do to save your life.
And the difference is, a therapist will look at you and say, I really think you should reconsider your use of alcohol or substances. A friend will look at you and say, hey, stupid, stop fucking drinking. Are you out of your mind? Do you want to destroy yourself? Well, no, then fucking stop. Stop. You gotta stop, man. You are a therapist can't say that.
Yeah.
But we don't know that. Again, we don't know that because we're not informed consumers of this whole landscape,
And a friend will tell you day or night, when you get the itch for that bottle, you call me and we'll talk it through, because it's going to happen. You're going to hit the wall and you think, well, the only thing that's going to take care of this right now is a drink. No, it won't. But pick up the phone, call your friend. That's what the friend is there for. And not calling your therapist in the middle of the night just because you want to drink.
Yeah, that probably you don't have that phone number. Okay, that ain't happening.
Yeah.
Timmy, your thoughts about that final block in the wall of isolation?
Well, my experience with therapists is match all of you. It's not going to get you out of that damn.
Wait a minute, did you say all of yous?
I did, didn't I?
That's it, Archie Bunker.
Yous guys.
You said Archie Bunker.
All of yous guys. It's same as yous guys.
Did you ever go seek any kind of counseling or therapy when you were in Oregon, when you were going through all this struggle?
Not in Oregon. It was hard to find. When I got to Corpus Christi, when I had a job, I went to the VA because I thought I better get a physical because I hadn't had one in many a year. It turned out to be I thought something was wrong with me, and it was. I was raging diabetic. I didn't know. And I looked so distraught that a therapist had me pulled out of the waiting line and brought in to see him. I wasn't there to see a therapist. Then I started seeing him, and it was okay, but that guy who I had a good working relationship with, I think was around for 3 months, and then he left. So, and the next person, he said he gave me he highly recommended this next guy pick me up, and he was going to call me, and he never did. And I wasn't excited enough by it to go back and see him, because I was gradually getting myself back together. At least I had a semi good paying job and a place to live. So I was in high cotton there, man. But no,
you can see that though. I mean, the fact that you have a job, that there is financial light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, those are huge things in the darkness, in the darkness of the valley of the shadow of death. So all this other stuff, it can go away. No need to. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no,
we're moving forward.
Yeah, I didn't start out. I became the safety director for a trucking company. And I was out on the road constantly with those guys, helping them chain down loads and stuff, oil field trucking, heavy stuff. I kind of liked it, man. And so, and I was in a position where I could make things happen. The owner was very happy. We got the Safest Trucker of the Year award. 16. I mean, we were making things happen. And so our stats were great. And that was how I slowly got back on my feet. And, but it wasn't through the help of the therapist. The only thing that the therapist helped me realize was just how panicked I must have looked to be picked out of the crowd like that, because he was concerned about how I looked. And I heard that from other people that would see me years later and say, "Oh man, you look so much better." And I'm like, "Man, I don't even know what you're talking about. Was it that bad?" And be like, "Yeah, it was that bad." And I had no clue. But that's stress. That's stress. He's just eating away at you.
Well, and I've written 2 books. The blueprint of this is a book entitled From Trauma to Joy. And depending on which version you buy, it's 425 pages or approximately 300 pages. Now, there's a fair amount of illustrations in there because I know my audience. But one of the things that dawned on me after I wrote it was I went to therapy for close to 2 years. There's not one thing in there where I quoted a therapist. But I will say this, and Wade said a little bit ago, it was the first person I probably talked about these issues with. And I like both guys, but I think what I didn't understand about therapy was that it is a long-term, they're going to try to bend, this steel rod, and it's going to be a slow process and a slow bend, because what they're going to do is have discussions with you so you can come to these conclusions on your own. Well, that's not going to happen quickly. We don't know that though. And so a lot of us don't stick around for it because it's not really changing my life and helping me. And so when they explain the rationale behind why they have to do it the way they do it, I think is a pretty sad commentary on you can't give somebody that kind of authority because they'll abuse it. Because that's why coaches, teachers, and other mentors in life are able to have such profound impact on so many people. And because they're not hamstrung, they will look at you and say, "Hey, come in here, shut the door. I'm hearing things about you drinking and doing drugs that I'm surprised at. Are you doing those things?" "Yes, sir, I am." "All right, you need to stop. You understand me? And when you feel the need, you call me. You got my phone. You call me or you come to my house." And somebody will look back and say, "You don't realize what you did for my life. You cared about me. And I was going through stuff in my own home that I didn't even want to tell you about." But it was that conversation that changed my life. And I'll tell you a story. I went back to church. I started doing the things that ultimately would change the trajectory of my life. And the therapist can't do that for you. But we don't know that. So we tend to reject that course of action. So again, I just want to make the case to everybody that this path to isolation is the intuitive path. It's the suck it up path. It is the ignorant path, because in our ignorance, what we tell ourselves is, I'm so unique because of my traumatic experiences. Nobody can understand what I've been through. Therefore, I'm not going to go there. And again, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. But until you come to a forum like this, until you learn these things, it all makes sense. And every one of us did our own version of those things. Wade?
Yeah. It's I talked a little bit about just the stuff leading up to one's death, and then you add another layer, right? I've already convinced myself that I have some triggers that I need to protect people from. Driving the truck's the best option for me because it keeps me away from most people. And then my son commits suicide. Well, I'm a preacher's kid. I was raised in church. My children were raised in church. Not only were they raised in church, they were raised at the VFW. They were raised around veterans. They spent all this time with these people. They were well grounded. And then all of a sudden there's this descent into darkness, and click, bang, he's gone. And then I have to go back. This is where before, it ended up pretty quick that I had to decide, how am I going to assess this? Right. Because if I don't choose the path of honesty about this, then I'm not going to survive, because I can't take the guilt anymore. I can't take any more of this. And that's where I kind of started working on the process of, I call it the 3 files of everything that, every memory that comes up to me, then I have to assign it a value. Guilty, meaning my fault. Not guilty, meaning not my fault, or I did the best I could. But the immediate aftermath of Juan's suicide was not just obviously the incredible loss of such a wonderful person, but it's the instinctive guilt that comes with it, of how did I go wrong, and how did I miss this? So
And
that,
if you think, if everybody thinks about this as that layer, Tim's dealing with his failure, Wade's dealing with that guilt, all made worse by the fact that the way he makes his living is in this isolated truck, where he's physically isolated every day that he goes to work. He's by himself, alone with his whole thoughts, other than his dog Orion, right?
yes,
But you talk about a recipe for disaster. It is physical isolation of my job, compound with my emotional isolation that I believed was the best course of action for me. Now, this is the way I support my family, and I can't just jump out of it and do something else. Life doesn't work like that. And you're in this, call it this isolation steel trap, part of it of your own design, but there's no wiggle room, because, I can't find a job to replace this job right now. And so I'm stuck here. And you can see how dark this is, right? So.
Yeah. And, and you're battling the thoughts. Well, if I get out of this and I get in office, what happens if I lose my, the overplaying every situation. If I punch somebody out the office, that's a felony, and that's it. So I better just stay where I'm at. And it should be a felony to punch somebody out the office. Let me be clear, right? But that's the overplaying of scenarios, because I'm just programmed to look. When I got a mission, I look at the possible consequences, possible outcomes, plan for everything. I'm going to Texarkana today. All right, the main route's this. What's the backup routes? What's the weather look like? What are the DOT reports that are out there right now? Or Texas TDOT, Texas DOT, or whatever. What's the Department of Transportation reports? What's my backup? Where's my fuel stops? All that's planned out in advance.
But again, in your isolated state, your reaction to the physical pain of that doctor yanking that out of your nose was an irrational reaction. If you would have sat down with people and said, hey, I need to talk about this, but what do? In this dark space, I'm ashamed of that reaction. I'm not going to tell people about that. And then we convince ourselves that I can't have a job where I'm in a leadership position because what happens if I snap? Well, wait a minute. What you're doing is you're taking an anomaly and you're telling me that that's normal. And that's not the truth. But this is how we convince ourselves about walking across the country, about I can't have this job. It's in this isolated space that we don't talk about these things, and that's how powerful it is. But everybody does it. Everybody does it.
And even like I've said before, go to a cigar lounge and sit down. You don't have to talk about this stuff, but human interaction will calm your own stupidity. And I mean that sincerely, your own stupidity. That you will say, well, I'm not really so different. I'm not really so messed up. I mean, sure, I'm a little messed up, but that's not.
Yeah, let's not get carried away.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, look at me. So, but when you cut that off completely and you end up in completely isolated, your own voice will lie to you and it will amplify itself. So just be very, very careful of that.
Yeah, Tim says the same thing. But again, and then you layer on this thing on top of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So intuitively, we fake, we numb, we hide, we isolate. That's by intuition. And then you add this thing, which is a great enabler of more isolation. We spend more time alone. We have fewer friends. Okay, all the things that we know statistically about the country. As we kind of wind this down, I want to talk about epiphanies and gates that you went through. For me, I had been in the talk radio business. I start this podcast, and so I begin to have conversations, and I'm learning about my life, listening to other people talk about their life. My conclusion is, holy shit, man, I'm not very different. We just said this. I'm not very different than these other people. In fact, I'm not nearly as fucked up as most of them, but I didn't know that. And so it's in listening to other people that I realized I was just a different version of that. And that's where the motivation to share this knowledge was, hey, if I tell people that we're all struggling with the same shit, we're all doing this on the down low because you don't want anybody to know how screwed up you are, not realizing that they're way more screwed up than you are. But until you get into a forum where you discuss this, you don't know that. And so in our ignorance, we intuitively move to isolation. Was there any moment in your life when you began to talk about this, or you heard somebody else talk about this shit, where a light bulb went on and said, hey, this is okay, I need to talk about this, and holy shit, I can't believe how much different I feel simply by participating in this? Wade, did you have any moments that you recall like that?
For me, the dam kind of broke with one suicide. So I had to, I wasn't going to be silent about it.
But what happened? What did you do? Do you remember an experience of sharing that experience and interacting with other people in that space where you concluded me doing this is the right thing, and oh my God, I can't believe how much different I feel?
No, but what that did was start the search for how to do it. I knew I had to do it, but it started the search for how to do it. And until Dan introduced me to you, and that kind of opened the doorway there. And
so wait a minute, you concluded, because the story about you contacting me is you send me an email at probably about 3:30 in the morning Central Time. I get it at 1:30. At 1:30 and 6 seconds, I sent a reply. Wade had already passed out because he'd been drinking. So in that space, you had concluded that I've got to change. I can't do this.
Well, that was part of it, but I knew I couldn't tell Juan's story without looking at my own story. That's what I knew after Juan died. I just didn't know how I was going to do this. And that started the search of, I can't be silent. I've got to use Juan's story to prevent other suicides, was what I was thinking. And I've got to learn how to help families after suicide, because we're not going to prevent all of them. We want to, but we're not going to. So how do I speak? What do I do? How do I, is there something I can teach? I'm a knuckle dragging Neanderthal. How do I get out there and speak to people, or just, I don't know, just show up and hug somebody after a funeral? I've got to do something.
But organic to that thought is the accompanying thought that says, but I've got to work on myself first, or I've got to work on myself at the same time.
Yeah, because you can't step into the spotlight and not be seen, right? Everybody's going to see you, so you better be honest. Because if you come in with well intentions about suicide prevention, but you're not honest about your own trash, your own backstory, you're not going to be effective, because you're going to come off as inauthentic. Because you have to face the reality of who you are and what you have done. And you also got to go through that checklist of, okay, I've done this, but I'm not as bad as I think I am. But no, but you can't step into the spotlight and have drag in your own trash and thinking nobody's going to see it. You've got to be honest about that. And I knew that's the way it was going to have to be. So I've got to face my own self. And that was where it began. But when Dan introduced me to you, that was really the vehicle.
I want to come back to that, but to me, you had heard this stuff. It wasn't for you, might be for other people. Was there a moment that you had, and then, your wife makes you call me to tell me that you're doing gummies again? I tell you to be gentle with yourself, but is there an intellectual moment, either something somebody said or something you participated in, where the light bulb said, this is a good thing, I'm getting better? Because Tim now is the chief of staff of the Bar X organization, that and this whole idea of transformation is a piece of what they do for veterans, guys who've gone to war. And so your life revolves around this now. Was there something that happened where you went, wow? Because there's, in my book, there's a story about Raymond and Mercedes. In the story, Raymond came to one of my online seminars, but he wasn't going to participate because he wasn't going to share his shit in front of a bunch of people he didn't know, to include a bunch of women who were recovering alcoholics. And then one of those women clicked off safe and started talking about being sexually abused as a child. And it's a beautiful thing that you read in the book, where he says, I watched the courage of this woman talk about that, and she inspired me. And I thought, if she has the balls to talk about that, who am I not to do the same thing? And he said, she inspired. And so it's a very beautiful moment when he talked about being inspired, by somebody else. Did you have any kind of moment that you can recall where you said, yeah, I know my wife put her foot up my ass, but I want to do this now?
No, I mean, well, obviously, my wife putting her foot up my ass was a tremendous motivator. But I'd been listening. When you were doing your All Marine podcast, I listened to them all the time because I was on the road constantly. I remember that one time you tricked me into telling you that I'd been homeless because you were such a good interviewer. And that was a bit much. That almost scared me. I didn't really want people to know that, but I think it was the gradual application of good fiscal discipline, because that got us through some financial hurdles, and that combined with the fact that just because they're legal, they shouldn't do gummies, which I knew, but I don't know why I was so obstinate in not knowing. That's what
Well, I
got
do
me
because
there.
this stuff didn't apply to you.
Yeah,
Did you-
I was sitting there thinking that I knew all along all of it applied to me, but it was but I mean, and it was the structure of listening to you and your programming that where I got the hint on the fiscal discipline. I mean, you talk about that. That's part of your book.
Well, can I make a point there? And if I could introduce you to all the people who I've watched change their lives, what Tim is describing, something that everybody goes through, and that is they make progress in one area. They'll sit and they'll listen, and all of a sudden, very much on the down low, whether it's financial, whether it's disclosure, talking about it, whether it's physical fitness and the effect that has on their brain, and all of a sudden they're feeling different. This whole journey is a lot, and it covers a lot of facets of your life. It's not easy, but the first step is the successful step, and all of a sudden this little light goes on in your head, and you think, holy shit, man, this worked. The discipline I showed financially, and I stopped doing gummies. My life's going in a direction that I like. I want to keep doing that. And if I just continue to build this out into these other pieces of my life, everything he says is true. And that's the power of the truth, right? Because nobody can call bullshit on it, because it's fucking true, man. And then all of a sudden you see, but as Timmy just described, it starts with a single light bulb going off in a single part of your life. And that tends to be the first domino that falls.
Yeah, and that was the domino for me, because I had my wife and I had the physical fitness thing down, thank God, and so after that we're not drinkers. I mean, there wasn't much left to do, but start getting a little bit more rigorous about my application of this, dealing with the truth, and then being able to step out and help other people, which I can now do on, not on scale, but on a big enough scale, that it makes a hell of a positive difference. And so, I mean, I am certainly not in the same position I could have been had I been wise with the money I earned contracting all those years. But I'm fine. I'm comfortable. My wife and I get along just great, and we're very fiscally responsible. And that's just a matter of discipline. We're just.
But again, just so everybody knows, this is not intuitive. Timmy
it's
got
hard.
dragged. Timmy came to this in denial, with his wife's foot so far up his ass, she was wiggling her toes out of his nose. That's how far her foot was up his ass. I mean, so he didn't come here on his own thinking, yeah, this is a good idea. I need to do this. I need to change my life. And the reason I point that out is because we all tend to do that. I knew there was something really, really wrong with me because my anger was getting worse, and it was really made worse. And I was really struggling because I worked for the worst person in my life just before I got out of the Marine Corps. I worked for the worst leader I'd ever worked for in my life. And I remember thinking, I want to kill that motherfucker. Now, when people like us say that, it's not like somebody in high school who's really upset and says, I want to kill that guy. Oh, no. Trust me. We've been a part of people leaving the planet, and I wanted to kill that guy. And that's when I knew that I need to do something about. But up until that point, I did the same thing that Wade did, that Tim did, which was suck it up. I'd have little episodes at Home Depot or on the freeway or wherever. And I was just like, okay, well, I need to do better at that. It just kept getting worse. And so again, I hope in this discussion that if you're watching this, you can see yourself in all these little vignettes we've told about ourselves, right? How it wasn't until I began to listen to people tell a different version of the same story over and over. And then those conversations, I'm like Hansel and Gretel picking up the next piece of bread, going down this path. I didn't know anything about therapy. I didn't know that therapists couldn't tell me what to do. All I knew was that it took an awful lot of time, and I didn't think I was making a lot of progress. Well, that's the way it works by design. They don't tell you what to do for ethical reasons. They can't, right? For reasons of liability. That's the big thing. And they don't want to go there because they don't want to lose their practice. So they stay in their lanes. They do it by the numbers. And that's the way it goes. Well, I rejected that. I didn't go back after 18 months or something like that. But I want you to know that the intuitive path is the path to isolation. The path to transformation is counterintuitive. And so in this discussion with Wade and Tim today, I wanted to use all of us as examples. We've all done this. We've also all transformed our lives. And the simple message is, if we can fucking do it, so can you. So Wade, give us a couple final thoughts.
No, it's just that. It's if I can make changes, anybody can. If I can, walk away from the bottle, anybody can. And if I can turn, it's the counterintuitive thing of turning and looking into the face of pain and into the face of guilt, right? You start to take the power away from it and face, you need to have a realistic assessment of what your isolation is doing to you and how you are lying to yourself, because that's the only voice you hear. It's a self-condemnation. You're your own worst prosecutor. Just be very careful of isolation. Isolation is a killer, and it doesn't, and again, you don't have to go somewhere and just reveal to everyone your deepest, darkest secrets, but go have human interaction. It will make you realize that you're not that different. There's some things you need to work on. Yeah, of course, but you're not that bad, and you deserve to be here just like the rest of us. So go to a cigar shop. I can recommend some cigars if you'd like, but hey, come hang out.
Timmy, a couple final thoughts about this discussion of isolation.
Isolation is a killer. There's no doubt about it. And it has significant adverse impacts on your overall mental and physical health, to the point that the stress of carrying that stress literally can be seen on your face. Something I never would have thought. So that's I just want to leave it with that. And don't eat the gummies. They're not going to help you either.
Well, no, it's the numbing piece. One final question, and I want to contrast that with isolation. Since you've left isolation behind, the things that you've seen, the discussions that you guys have been a part of that have changed people's lives, how has your life changed since you left isolation behind? Wade?
Well, it's the affirmation and the actual joy of helping someone else, right? Yeah, I've still got issues. Nobody's on a perfect road. I mean, Elon Musk became a trillionaire yesterday. Well, you go talk to him about one of his biggest traumas, and he's been very public about it. He hurts just as much as any other parent, right? So it's not like the money was the answer to make everything perfect. But the change for me is just realizing or affirming that, yeah, I can make a difference. And if it's only for one or two people, that's great. That's enough. But I know that just because the people I've been able to learn from, what life has taught me, mostly the hard way because I'm a jackass, and the things that I've studied and learned from you guys, and from just reading books and reading history, I know enough I can help people. So I'm going to be out there doing it. But the affirmation that comes from that and the joy that comes from that is, trust me, it beats the isolation hands down. So try.
Timmy, thoughts on being able to positively leaving isolation behind and the things you've seen and what you've done since you've done that?
Well, in a sense, it makes things a lot easier because of all the negative ramifications of that isolation. But it's not like I'm on a flower scented path descending into eternal goodness. Still got to work, still got to be disciplined, and that's just what it's done for me. Is I've now developed habits that are good habits, that are good fiscal planning, better decision-making skills. I mean, everything is just better. It's not I don't want to make it sound like I'm blowing smoke, like everything's just now perfect, because it's not. But every problem I have, I know exactly what to do about it. Everything that is a bump in the road, no longer is it a catastrophic bump in the road. It's just something to deal with and get over. And so it's been a totally positive impact on my life and everybody who I interact with a lot, the people that are close to me, family and friends and whatnot. It's been a very positive impact on their lives, without doubt. And so that's all I have to say. I mean, it's not magic. You don't transform yourself magically into this uber functional person. You just transform yourself into somebody that knows how to handle the challenges that pop up as they pop up and has a confidence to do it correctly.
You know, Frankl talks about giving meaning to your suffering, and I think you just heard, two guys articulate how they've done that, and then what a change that makes in your life. And I was, while Wade and Timmy were talking, I was thinking about, what we're describing is this journey from trauma to joy. Well, that phrase comes into my head when I'm in Macy's buying a shirt, and I had done my public speaking thing in the morning, and this woman just making chit chat looks at me and says, she said, "Did you find what you needed?" I'm looking for a shirt. I said, "I did, thank you." And she said her name was Lonnie. She works at Macy. And she said, "Well, how's your day been?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, my day's been awesome." She said, "Really?" She said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I do some public speaking. And I did it this morning, and it was absolutely fantastic." Continues to ring up my shirt. She said, "Do you mind if I ask you what you talk about?" And I said, "No." But I'd never really articulated this in public, other than doing what I do. And I thought for a second, how the hell do I explain what I do? And that's when the phrase, "I teach people how to go from trauma to joy," popped into my head. And I looked at her and I said that. And she looked at me and she stopped doing what she's doing. She put her shirt on the counter and she said, "Could you teach me?" And I told her, "Lady, you better bring that shirt up or you're going to get your ass fired." And she said, "Oh, no, I can talk to you. You're a customer." I said, "Okay." "You're a guest." I said, "Okay." So I gave her my business card and I told her to go watch a couple of the podcasts on my website. And then I taught her a 2-minute class. And then she looked at me and she said, "I don't know why God sent you into my life today, but I needed to meet you." Those are the kind of things that have happened to me since I stopped isolating myself. And I owe a lot of people who told their stories on my podcast a huge thank you for teaching me all the shit they taught me. Since I began to share that, I don't think I could adequately articulate what my life has become. And so what you heard about today is that if you're on a path that you've isolated yourself, join the crowd, man. It's the intuitive way that we live our lives. transforming your life is a different path. You can do it. If we can do it, you can do it. But this journey from trauma to joy, and on that, and I love what I do so much to include that title because of the woman who it's associated with. And I saw her, and this is during COVID. I see her a year later. I'm back in Macy's, and I see her, and I go walking up to her. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know if you remember me. And I'm getting emotional just think about it. She looks at me with her mask on and she says, Michael, how could I ever forget you? Right? And that's what we're talking about. If you'll have the courage, and it takes courage, to not fake it, to not isolate, to not numb yourself anymore, and to walk the path that Tim has walked. Tim's one of the most courageous guys I know because nobody wants to talk about this stuff. Wade is right there with him. I mean, you can watch the answer to this question. Would you guys rather do this stuff or be shot at?
Oh, yeah, shot at. Shot at's like a walk in the park compared to this.
And people think we're joking when we say that, but we're not.
Mm-mm.
But I will tell you.
Especially when you can shoot back.
Yeah,
exactly. The deep, profound experiences that are waiting for you when you give meaning to your suffering are indescribable. And that's why we're here. Okay. So as I end this today, first of all, thank you guys for doing this. And again, for everybody watching this, the reason you should like, share, and subscribe to this is so people you don't even know, who you have no idea that they're in a really dark place today, they can see this and go, let me take a look at that. And in so doing, that may open a door to a comment like, hey man, I checked out that podcast or that short reel on Instagram or Facebook or something. And holy shit, I watched the reel and then I watched the whole podcast and wow, that was really cool. And that's a door opening to a conversation that has the chance to save somebody's life. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to walk the path we've walked. We want you to see the miracles we've seen. And that's why we have these conversations. Thank you very much for doing this today, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
My pleasure.
Any final thoughts before I let this go?
Stay away from the gummies.
All right. On that note, well done, boys. That'll do it. Thanks for watching today. And my thanks, obviously, to Wade and Tim. But on this path from trauma to joy, it's no joke. If you're struggling, like you just heard, welcome to the club. You can change that. All right. Takes a little bit of courage. But you too can get out of that dark place. You can walk this path from trauma to joy. So just keep watching. Go into the different segments, the different shorts that you see here on this YouTube channel. And don't be afraid to buy my book. My book is a blueprint on how you do this. So on that note, you can find everything I do on the website, From Trauma to Joy. You can find my contact information. If I can help you, if I can help a friend, if I can help somebody in your family, do not be afraid. Reach out. I would love to. And it's going to be you and me that help them because I'm not going to be in touch with them. You and I are going to be in touch with them. They will feel safer doing it like that. And then who knows? Maybe you'll get to see a miracle. On that note, I'm Mike McNamara. Thank you so much for watching the From Trauma to Joy podcast. And we'll see you again next week.